These conspiracy theories turned out to be true. One of the craziest conspiracy theories that people had that ended up being later declassified definitely is the idea that the government manipulates what the media is putting out and what the news is saying. This was not just a rumor, this was a conspiracy theory that people had for a very long time before it got officially exposed. So this is about Project Mockingbird. So basically the CIA created Project Mockingbird as an effort to secretly recruit journalists, editors, and publishers and other media executives inside the biggest news outlets in the country. And basically the overall goal was to have these people that were paid by the CIA to be in the back end of things and be able to steer the narrative of the US at the time when it came to the media. So this was happening in the 1940s and 50s, and it wasn't declassified until the 1970s. So for years, whenever conspiracy theorists would say that they thought the CIA or the government was paying the media to steer a specific way to make the US look better, they were right. They were correct, because that actually was genuinely happening. And people still think it's happening to this day, but we'll talk about that later. What's crazy too is that the CIA initially denied the extent of their involvement, but the truth ended up coming out later that basically there were hundreds of journalists on the CIA's payroll, making sure that we're working at major news outlets like the Washington Post, New York Times, Time Magazine, etc. And only some of the journalists were fully aware they were working for the CIA. Others were brought in under the guise of patriotic duty. They had no idea that they were being manipulated by the CIA, which is freaking nuts if you think about it. And throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s, Project Mockingbird really was dominating the media and was steering exactly what we were seeing. So they would not only suppress stories, but it was also about manufacturing stories, which is kind of nuts here. Like throughout the 1950s and 60s, anytime the US needed to justify political or military action abroad, stories favorable to the government would appear in these major news outlets and newspapers just all over America simultaneously. So it calmed the people and made them think that America was doing the right thing. It's obviously just kind of nuts that for so many years, like the average American, like obviously there were people questioning it, which was why it was a conspiracy before we knew the truth. But the average American, like the public in general, believed that these journalists were independent observers and bringing an unbiased truth to the newspaper that, you know, you're reading every morning, when in reality the government was literally paying them what to say, what to do, what to take out, what to add. It's concerning. It definitely is, because a lot of people think that this is still happening today. Allegedly, Project Mockingbird has been closed down since the 1970s, but people genuinely still believe this to be true, and I 100% agree. I don't even think it's a conspiracy theory because we know it's been able to happen in the past, so yeah. I do think it's still happening. I don't know. It's scary. It leaves a lot of scary questions that still remain unanswered. Like how many stories were actually influenced by the CIA? How many wars were justified through planted narratives? And scarily to me is how many whistleblowers were silenced or discredited because the media gatekeepers had these CIA ties. Don't like it. Don't like it. Still think it's happening. Absolutely still happening to this day, allegedly. Okay. And again, after the 1970s, the CIA claimed that it ended its relationships with journalists and news organizations, but a lot of people believe that they are still doing the same thing to this day. And even though it's a conspiracy theory now, because we're not positive, I guess it wouldn't be so surprising if in 20 or 30 years, we find out that the government was paying news outlets, again, to rewrite the narrative of the US. And I think this has to be happening. Like, I would be shocked if it wasn't, honestly, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts because I feel like this would be such a crazy time to exist. Like, obviously I wasn't born yet in the 1970s, and I just think it would have been so nuts to have thought this and to have been like, why is the media so pro-war and just so like quick to defend the US? Like, this is weird. And then to find out years later that it was actually fake, and then to find out years later that they were just being paid off by the CIA is absolutely bonkers. Honestly, it's really crazy and really bad. At the end of the day, Project Mockingbird is in fact a confirmed government conspiracy theory that fundamentally violated the principles of a free press. I don't know, I just think this is so nuts. And honestly, like, I always just think of what the government is more capable of now. Obviously, there's more technology, there's more social media outlets. Like, do they control our algorithms? And do they like suppress certain things? And all, I don't know. It makes my head hurt because, like, yeah, obviously they do. Obviously. Why wouldn't they? And it's fucked up. It is messed up. for sure. All right, the next conspiracy theory has to do with Walmart's dead peasant life insurance policies. This is beyond fucked up. So what's crazy about this is one of the biggest corporations in the world, Walmart, was secretly taking out life insurance policies on its low-wage employees, not telling them, and then collect massive payouts when the employees died and didn't pay any of it to their families. It is honestly insane. I can't believe that this actually happened, and a lot of people believe is still happening to this day. But this was a pretty popular theory before it was exposed, and once it was exposed as the truth, I feel like we can't look at Walmart the same way, right? Allegedly. Okay. And it's not just Walmart. There's a lot of major corporations that did the exact same thing, but it was basically a fully legal financial scheme that is called corporate-owned life insurance, but eventually the nickname became the dead peasant life insurance. And realistically, it was for Walmart and other companies to be able to take life insurance out on their employees, which they have their medical histories. They know who's likely to maybe not live as long of a life. They can pick and choose and take out life insurance policies without even telling them, and then cash in a fat check and not give it to their family. It's so crazy that this actually happened. Walmart was not the only company doing this. Several different banks, telecom companies, grocery chains, they were all doing this as well, but Walmart really became the face of this scandal because of the scale of what they were doing. Because they always had millions of employees at a time, even a tiny fraction of these deaths would equal huge payouts. So before a lot of this information was declassified, they basically made it seem like these policies were pitched to corporations as a way to offset costs of employee benefits. This ended up getting a lot of people wondering what was really going on here, and at the end of the day, many of these companies only applied these policies to low-level workers and people whose deaths would not meaningfully impact or affect corporative operations, which is so messed up. So messed up, but it's just so grotesque to think that these workers earning minimum wage had no idea that their lives are just being financially leveraged without their consent. It's bonkers. It's honestly bonkers. Again, this was all just theories at a point and small anecdotes of people's families finding out the truth, but there was never any official information about it until the late 90s, early 2000s, when the truth was revealed and all the families discovered that when their loved one dies, these corporations were cashing in six-figure life insurance checks, which is so crazy. Some of them were over $300,000 per employee. Nuts. And at the time as well, the corporations defended themselves by being like, this is perfectly legal, because at the time it was, which is so nuts to me because obviously legality does not equal morality. And when the public finally learned that this was actually happening, outrage just exploded. I think it was because it was so clearly and cold-heartedly driven by money. To see an actual corporation that you go to pretty often be a part of that is really sad and scary. I don't know. I can't imagine what it would have been like to discover this after a time, especially if you had a loved one who worked at Walmart and passed away. And also these policies would last past the point where these people were working at Walmart. You could get a job at Walmart when you're 16 or whatever years old, working at Walmart, and then 20 years later something tragic happens and Walmart will still collect money from you, a former employee. Or would, I guess. But then the conspiracies of it all went deeper, and then internal documents were released that showed that Walmart specifically targeted employees that were statistically likely to stay with the company for a long time, or even more disturbingly, they would specifically target employees that had higher morality risks due to age, health complications, or economic stress. So horrible. Absolutely horrible. And eventually all of this was declassified and lots of lawsuits began piling up against Walmart. And that was when the public learned that this conspiracy, this thought, that corporations really don't give a shit about any of their employees was true. Lots of people still think that this is happening to date. I mean, honestly, I feel like corporations are so shit. They just would find a way around this and still be able to somehow do the exact same thing but under a different name or whatever. It's honestly very, very disturbing, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts on it because I've honestly never heard about this before. When I saw it, it was so freaking interesting and really, really sad and messed up. All right, the next conspiracy theory that turned out to be true we're gonna talk about Taylor Swift for a second, okay? So if you remember, slash it literally still is happening to this day, a lot of people are getting mad at Taylor Swift because of her private jet carbon emissions. We talked about the conspiracy theory that, like, the movie Frozen, like, people believe that the reason that Disney named Frozen was because now whenever you Google Disney Frozen, you don't get, you know, the conspiracy theories of Disney, like Walt Disney's frozen head or body being in Disneyland. And so people believe that that was to cover up that theory. And people think Taylor Swift did a similar thing with the Jets, because at the peak of this backlash, Taylor went to one of Travis's games for the first time, and it was a Jets game. And so at that time, when you would Google Taylor Swift Jets, it would be pictures of her at the Jets game. And that was kind of the only thing people were talking about. And it let the controversy subside for a bit. So that's a conspiracy theory that she, like, specifically did that on purpose. I believe that. I do think that a lot of different companies, people, celebrities in general do this all of the time. Honestly, they'd be kind of stupid to not. But what's fucked up is the conspiracy theory that Taylor Swift was actually actively trying to cover this scandal and, like, really keep the lid on it is actually proven to be true. It's kind of nuts, okay? Again, for years, I feel like we speculated and talked about Taylor Swift's Jets. I didn't see that many people talk about it. I don't know if I was just, like, on that side of TikTok or whatever, but especially in 2022, people were talking about it a lot, which is, like I said, when she went to the Jets game. But what's insane is that Taylor Swift was ranked #1 in 2022, the highest celebrity CO2 emitter of the entire year, which is obviously kind of nuts. Within hours, Taylor Swift's team was defending this and saying that Taylor Swift's jet is loaned out to regularly to different individuals, so she's not responsible for most of the trips. I don't know if that's really an excuse that you could use. Like, I don't think that makes that any better. But what's crazy is that in 2024, this conspiracy theory that Taylor was trying to cover this up, it was confirmed that she was doing it because she sent a cease and desist to a college student named Jack Sweeney in late 2023 or early 2024, and basically threatened to sue him for stalking and harassing behavior because he was sharing her private jet's locations, and she was claiming that these were safety risks, which is ridiculous because these are public flight logs. Like, this is why this ended up not going anywhere, because they can't do anything about it. But the fact that they tried so hard to, like, cover this up and get people to stop talking about it really makes me believe the other conspiracy theory about the Google suppression 100%. And also, like, to sue a student putting out public information is so crazy to me. Trying to get this public information, flight data taken away from the internet is honestly concerning, and a lot of posts did disappear at the time. And what's crazy too is, like, a lot of it was done quietly. Like, a lot of people, when they were first talking about this in, like, 2022, like, Taylor Swift was kind of just ignoring this controversy. She still kind of has. She really hasn't said much about it. But the fact that it's true that Taylor Swift's team actually was quietly trying to suppress this story is nuts. It's nuts. It's kind of exactly like what we're talking about, like less dramatically than Operation Mockingbird, because obviously this isn't the CIA paying people, but it's the same principle of, like, trying to suppress or change narratives around news stories, because by threatening people, suing them, or paying them, who knows. And I don't like that this ended up being true, because if I was Taylor Swift and I was, like, already fucking doing this shit and I didn't care, like, about the carbon emissions, like, I just wouldn't say anything, honestly. Like, trying to sue this kid for, like, releasing public flight information, it's not a good look. I don't think it's cute. I'm sorry. But I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this, because honestly, I was always kind of up in the air if I believed that Taylor Swift was trying to dispel this story behind the scenes, because it was so big. Obviously, like, dispelling it would just be, like, in my head, I felt like trying to erase what already happened would just be impossible because so many people were talking about it. But the fact that she did still try, whack. Honestly, kind of nuts, and makes me believe a lot of other conspiracy theories about similar things. All right, the next conspiracy theory that ended up being true is the conspiracy theory that the NFL hid a lot of health risks, specifically CTE, which we'll get into. But the NFL basically tried to cover up a lot of concussions and safety hazards when it comes to football. So for years, various football players would report different symptoms that nobody really wanted to acknowledge. Like, it was kind of an underground concept. People were wondering if this was actually related to football, because at the time it was just a conspiracy theory. They were having memory problems, rage episodes, early onset dementia, suicides, behavioral changes that literally destroyed families, marriages, lives. And for years, it was just brushed off as coincidence or bad luck or or just like conspiracy and not true. And again, the NFL, as the most powerful sports organization in America, insisted that there was no proven link between football and long-term brain damage. Like, they very much tried to deny this fact, which is nuts. And what we know now is that behind the scenes, the NFL was doing literally everything possible to suppress the science behind this and cover up this controversy. So the NFL basically long-term denied the dangers of chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Again, big tobacco, like cigarette companies, were trying to hide research about cancer. At the time, the NFL was hiding research about concussions, but it ended up getting to a point where nobody could deny it anymore. So in the 90s, early 2000s, there were a lot of former NFL players began dying by suicide or suffering rapid cognitive decline. Men in their 40s and 50s, which is decades younger than typical dementia patients, were suddenly losing memories. One of the earliest cases was Mike Webster, who was a Pittsburgh Steelers legend and one of the greatest centers in NFL history. After retirement, his brain and life deteriorated rapidly. He became homeless. He was living out of a truck. He used super glue to keep his teeth in. Like, he wrote strange letters, forgot basic tasks, and eventually he passed away at the age of 50. His autopsy is what ended up revealing this unprecedented brain damage that was eerily similar to what scientists were seeing in boxers, the punch drunk syndrome. And that's kind of the spark that started the fire. So because of this, in 1994, under growing media pressure, really, the NFL created the Mild Traumatic Brain Injury Committee, which was supposedly to study the effects of concussions, but that was really just a cover-up. Because this committee wasn't staffed of independent neurologists or people who really knew anything about what was happening. They were actually just staffed by doctors that were handpicked by the NFL, who many of them had no experience or expertise in brain trauma. And basically their real job wasn't to uncover the truth, it was to create findings that protected the league, which crazy. And for years, this committee was publishing papers claiming concussions were not dangerous. Repeated hits had no lasting effects. Players who returned to games immediately were safe, and there was no proven link between football and any long-term brain disease, which obviously now we know is not true. But the NFL used these doctors to deny lawsuits, downplay injuries, silence critics, and again, reassure fans that the sport that they loved watching was safe. Meanwhile, these players continued to suffer. So everything kind of changed in 2002 when Dr. Bennett Amlu, who is a forensic pathologist in Pittsburgh, ended up performing Mike Webster's autopsy. He basically found a brain that was full of tau protein, which is a substance that forms clumps and kills brain cells. And it was the same substance that was found in boxers who were repeatedly taking blows to the head. So this doctor ended up naming the condition CTE, and when he published his findings, the NFL absolutely attacked him. They tried to discredit his research. They pressured medical journalists to retract his papers. They claimed that CTE didn't exist. And again, they insisted that football was safe. But then a lot of other former players passed away. Some of them took their own lives and specifically said that they wanted scientists to examine their brains. And I feel like famously, Aaron Hernandez, whose postmortem brain scan revealed one of the most advanced cases of CTE that anyone has ever seen at his age. And eventually at this point, the NFL had no choice but to acknowledge the fact that CTE was real. And by then the damage was kind of irreversible. Lawsuits piled up, the league paid billions of dollars in settlements. I think one of the most interesting concepts when it comes to CTE to talk about is O.J. Simpson. I think it's impossible to talk about CTE without talking about him, and I'm so frustrated that he didn't fucking give his brain to science and let people figure it out. Because I've wanted to know for decades now if O.J. Simpson had CTE, because a lot of people reported a change in his behavior. Like, people said that he was a very normal guy, obviously, before he allegedly committed a horrific murder. And so many people have the theory that he had CTE. And it's honestly probably pretty likely. But the thing is that you cannot test the brain for CTE until after the person is dead. So I was waiting. And now O.J. Simpson's dead, and guess what? We don't get to know anything. We don't get to know. That pisses me off so bad, because I feel like that would have been such an interesting piece of knowledge to have, because if he did have CTE, I feel like it would have definitely, for sure, made everyone believe that he did it. Not that I don't think there's a lot of people that don't believe that he did, but at the end of the day, we'll never know if he had CTE or not, because he refused to donate his brain to science, which pisses me off a lot. a lot. Like after his death, so many different researchers immediately expressed interest in studying it, but his family refused. There was no autopsy, no preservation, no opportunity for any neurologist to try and see if CTE was present. And now that's just that. Like that's just that. And I'm pissed about it. I still get mad about this to this day because I thought for sure we would know after he died, and then he did, and we don't know, and now we won't. But I just think it's so crazy that the NFL tried to cover this up for decades, and so many people had conspiracy theories about it because there were people freaking dying or changing their behaviors completely, and it took several notable football players to die for them to take it seriously. And that's so fucked up. It's so fucked up because obviously they knew, allegedly. I don't really believe in sports in general, but it's messed up. The next theory that turned out to be true is the idea that American Idol may have allegedly kind of assisted someone's taking of their own life, kind of. It sounds like a little bit of a stretch, but it actually is very fucked up. I cannot believe that this happened. I used to love American Idol as a kid, but this is so dark and put such a dark shadow on it, and they did a pretty good job covering this up because I didn't really hear much about it. So Paula Abdul basically had this stalker who was super fixated with her. She was obsessed. She was writing letters to her for 17 years before she ended up auditioning for American Idol. And obviously American Idol is known for kind of taking people and laughing at them. Like obviously they have these entertaining people who think, it's actually really sad to me, they think in their head that they're like gonna go to Hollywood and they sound so great and amazing, and obviously they were just kind of like a gag on the show to make it entertaining. And Paula Goodspeed was one of those people. So this woman was really named Sandra Mae McIntyre, and she ended up changing her name to Paula Goodspeed because of how obsessed she was with Paula Abdul. Really random obsession, by the way. I mean, yeah. She's cool. But anyway, over the years, Paula Goodspeed allegedly collected several photographs and magazines featuring Abdul. She copied her fashion, changed her name, sent her the hundreds, thousands of letters. And this wasn't typical. This was obviously like a stalker situation. She would try and show up to Paula's house several times. Like there was a lot of disturbances that she caused. And what's crazy is that she ended up auditioning for American Idol in 2005 in front of obviously Randy Jackson, Simon Cowell, and Paula Abdul. So how the producers aired it was just like this girl who just has an obsession with Paula. Like it was very like lighthearted, and like, yeah, obviously like they're laughing at her, she's not good, whatever. But behind the scenes, something more sinister was happening for sure, because Paula Abdul already knew who Paula Goodspeed was because she was stalking her for years. Paula was literally terrified of this woman, and she had already been dealing with Goodspeed's obsessive behavior. She had reported concerns, as she already asked for protection, and she already alerted the producers that this woman was not a typical contestant. She was a stalker. And yet they still had her audition anyway without Paula really knowing it was happening until it was happening, which is so fucking crazy. The American Idol staff really kind of tried to downplay this a lot and basically said they didn't notice the sheer volume of contestants, that it was her. They didn't know the seriousness of Paula's fears. But conspiracy theories started saying something else, which was that producers knew exactly who Paula Goodspeed was, and they allowed her to audition because it would make good TV. And that ended up being true. And honestly, it was very traumatizing for Paula Abdul. She was forced to sit there as the woman she feared for a very long time. Her literal stalker was performing at her. She said that she tried to hide her discomfort, but it was just so unfortunate, and the audition ended up being aired months later without Paula Abdul's consent. And after this aired, because they were like making fun of her in the audition, it was obviously Idol kind of pushes that boundary that way. I mean, it was mostly like Simon and Randy that were making fun of her. Paula Abdul started receiving more letters, gifts, disturbing notes, photos, and unwanted appearances by Paula Goodspeed at her house. Neighbors reportedly saw Paula Goodspeed's car parked near Paula Abdul's property on multiple occasions. Security guards were there. They intervened a lot, but Paula Abdul was scared. She was very, very concerned for her safety. When she raised her concerns to the Idol producers, she was allegedly told to keep quiet. So that's where the conspiracy theory kind of begins, is that did American Idol, first of all, know the danger that they were putting Paula Abdul in, but also did they hide the danger so that they could protect the show? And the answer ended up being yes. So on November 11th of 2008, authorities ended up finding a parked car near Paula Abdul's home in Sherman Oaks, California, and inside was Paula Goodspeed, and she had passed away by suicide. She had surrounded herself with photographs of Paula Abdul and records, and she obviously drove to Paula Abdul's house intentionally, and is so nuts to me. But when the news broke, this started confirming a lot of the conspiracy theories that people had before this was really a big story. So Fox and American Idol kind of released like a brief sterile statements. They were just like offered their condolences but avoided any specifics. And they again downplayed Paula Abdul's connection to Paula Goodspeed, and they completely avoided even mentioning the audition or any of Paula Abdul's past concerns. Meanwhile though, Paula was absolutely devastated. But obviously she knew this woman had problems. She knew this woman was unwell, and she didn't want to see her end up the way that she did. And it's very, very sad. She said, I knew she was a danger to herself. I knew she had problems, and I begged the show not to put her on TV. And that was the bombshell that broke it. Like, I guess there were a lot of conspiracies leading up to it that people thought maybe Idol had a more clear picture of who this woman was, and that Paula Abdul tried to get this removed from TV. And yeah, she confirmed that that theory was true, and that she expressed her fear to Idol and asked the producers to not feature Paula Goodspeed, and the audition aired anyway. So after Paula Goodspeed's death, that was also when a lot of the different conspiracy theories came to be true, which was that the producers were aware that Goodspeed had previously been flagged as mentally unstable. They ignored warnings because they thought the stalker would create controversy and be an interesting television. And also when the show aired, they requested media outlets to avoid highlighting the connection between the audition and Paula Goodspeed's obsession, because they kind of just made it seem like she was a super fan, not this like crazed person, and that's scary. It is. It's actually honestly really fucked up that they did it in the first place, but the fact that they then tried to cover that up and cover up the fact that they knew about it is so messed up. Honestly, I hope this girl's family gets something for this, because I just think that's so messed up. Like, I don't know, it's honestly just very, very sad and very scary. The last theory that ended up being true has to do with Princess Diana. So a lot of people after her death believed that Princess Diana maybe was being surveilled by the government, and in 2004, this was actually confirmed. So after Princess Diana separated from Prince Charles, she became literally the most photographed woman on earth. She was a humanitarian powerhouse. She was publicly outspoken about things that she wasn't supposed to be outspoken about. She broke royal protocol constantly. She was basically a nightmare for the royal family. They did not like what was happening there. And obviously we've talked about the conspiracy theory that they were maybe involved in her death, and that's not what we're here to talk about today, but I have videos on that. But what's crazy is that Diana actually felt like she was being watched and surveilled towards the end of her life, and that became a big conspiracy theory after she died. And then it was later proven that yeah, she was. There was American agencies, the NSA, admitted to having over 1,000 pages of classified intelligence files referencing Princess Diana. So an American agency was monitoring a British princess for reasons they refused to ever fully explain. Obviously, that's suspicious. And a lot of this has to do with racism, honestly, because Princess Diana dated two Muslim men, famously the one that passed away with her, Dodi Fayed. But prior to that, she was actually dating a British Pakistani heart surgeon named Hasnat Khan. And that was at the point that she started being followed, because the royal family did not want this to be a part of their legacy, which is so fucked up. And that like kind of leaks into why we think she was murdered. But allegedly before Diana's death, she told multiple friends that her phone lines clicked during calls, which is obviously a sign that they are tapped. She said that letters went missing, cars were following her at night, and she didn't trust the palace security anymore. And she also felt just like her overall conversations were being recorded. And again, the royal family kind of dismissed these conspiracy theories after Diana's death, but in 2004, the UK finally admitted that she was in fact being monitored. And what's crazy is they kind of released this information and just basically said she happened to be caught up in routine surveillance of other individuals. Yeah. Okay, so after several years of conspiracy and people wondering if Diana was being followed, it was proven that the M15 and the M16 were tracking her foreign movements. The NSA was keeping classified documents about her. Her calls were intercepted. Her relationships triggered intelligence. Her relationships were being followed. And overall, her political influence was raising government concerns. So that's why they were watching her. And obviously this doesn't prove that the British government murdered Princess Diana, which is a conspiracy theory a lot of people believe, but it does prove part of the conspiracy theory, which was that Princess Diana was under extensive government surveillance. She was being watched up until her death. And I think that that is so scary to even think about. And the fact that that actually happened and was covered up for several years is very concerning. But I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Anyway, that is it for today's video. If you guys liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below any conspiracy theories that you've seen that ended up being true. But that is it. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, and subscribe to new videos every week. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.